Greetings. This is Danielle DiMartino Booth. I am the CEO, founder, and chief strategist of QI Research, an independent research boutique that was founded after I left the Federal Reserve in 2015. I'd like to thank you today for taking a little bit more of your time to watch this longer form interview. Hopefully, I provide insights for you on the economy, on the financial markets, and of course, monetary policy and the interactions that it has with both economics and the markets. If you don't already follow me on YouTube, I sure would appreciate it if you would hit that follow button and share this with your friends, and look forward to any comments that you might want to leave as well. Again, this is Danielle DiMartino Booth. I thank you for your time. Take care.
I'm Keith McCullough, and welcome back. I have a big smile on my face because Danielle just makes me laugh before we even went live here, because she's funny and she's wearing the same color. We're looking very Democrat.
Blue Day. Whoa,
Yeah.
Didn't think about that.
You're in Connecticut.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not.
I'm wearing blue for the Huskies.
Nice.
My father's alma mater.
Oh, cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, we dialed it up so that we could have CPI Day and Danielle on the same day.
Don't forget claims.
Yeah, well, we got all that. So let's do inflation first, then labor.
Yep.
What's your immediate take on the CPI?
So, now that Trueflation, TRU, is going up, it's a lot more popular. It's funny the way that works, isn't it? It got down to like 1.3%, and now it's like 2.01%. People are like, we are going to hell in a handbasket. And it's been it's actually what we saw in the CPI this morning, food at home and natural gas. So those two things have been really big drivers. What was encouraging in today's inflation data was on a 6-month annualized basis, you've got shelter CPI down to, I want to say, 4.2%. And that's like the lowest since July of 2021. So, it's been really a long wait on shelter CPI. I mean, a long wait. But we just got another quarter of census data that shows us that, again, only 50% of the apartments that are coming out of the construction pipeline are being absorbed. They like to use big, huge verbs to describe bad stuff. So only 50% are being absorbed, meaning the other 50% are not being leased. Let's use the real word here. Because they're all they were all built in, with a non-white collar recession in mind. We're going to build luxury, 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 high up to the sky, and they're all going to be fully occupied or 50% absorbed. But at some point, you had to start to see the sheer effect of supply and demand, and I think a lot of people believe that law has been repealed, but it hasn't. And there's a lot of supply that's coming out there, and there's going to be a lot more supply after these two hurricanes. I mean, a lot more supply on the single-family side.
So the hurricanes, do you have a view if it's going to be inflationary or not?
It could be inflationary once the battles are fought and won between homeowner and FEMA-ish. But you already had kind of the short-term rental cowboys who learned how to become wealthy, like on TikTok in some seminar by buying like 1,000 apartments. You already have them on the ropes. They can't get financing. The people who are financing them can't get financing. So, I mean, just in the cities that have been directly hit, you've got more than 100,000 short-term rentals that somebody's going to have to do something with. And there's no guarantee that they were properly insured. Now, if you're not fully insured for something and you go to make your claim, especially in a state like Florida where home insurers are so friendly these days. So, and on top of that, Florida's a wealthy state. Yeah. And a lot of the places that got run over were wealthy communities where, give or take, a third of homeowners who, like 40% of homeowners, like nationwide, own their homes outright. But like in the state of Florida, because homeowners insurance is so expensive, about a third of the homes aren't even insured.
They don't even insure them, yeah.
Just because they own them outright, they're wealthy, and they're like, why would I pay that premium? Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, but unless Milton says there's no free lunch if you're not insured.
Mm. Do you have thoughts on that? There's a lot going on FEMA, how much they actually have versus, when they run out?
I mean, I don't believe in any place with bureaucrats' email addresses ending in .gov running out of money. I mean, I don't think that occurs in the real world. Remember, I used to work at the Federal Reserve, an inherently insolvent institution that can never be insolvent. Mm-hmm. So you get used to circularity when you're a bureaucrat. Yeah. And people forget, like, when the emergency unemployment benefits ran dry from the original CARES Act, Trump tapped FEMA to extend them. So clearly it's a bottomless pool of liquidity and money, care of Joe Q taxpayer. I mean, I'm going to digress for a second, right? In a world of AI and big data, they have managed to cut the budget of the Bureau of Labor Statistics household budget. I'm like, couldn't we just replace like thousands of bureaucrats and just add a little dabble of AI and see if we can't get some better data? But no, I don't. I'm not losing sleep at night worried about FEMA running out of money when the United States government clearly is inclined to print to kingdom come.
Yeah, I mean, they were off on the deficit by $320 billion in 4 months.
Rounding error.
I mean, why not just tack it on? I mean, this seems like, or do you disagree? I mean, this
is posturing.
That both parties are going to just keep spending, whoever gets elected, right?
Well, so here I'm going to push back a little bit. This just about got me physically assaulted in Kuala Lumpur a week ago today. When former President Trump approached Congress in December of 2020 and said, I want $2,000. That's the dollar amount I want on that second stimulus check. Now, a red Senate at the time capped him at $600. So I am in complete agreement with you. Both parties will spend on whatever they want to spend on. But I think that there is so much spite right now, and most of the polls say that the Senate's going to flip back to being red, that you might have maybe not a check and balance, that may be a bridge too far, but you might have a check on any inclination to go full board universal basic income.
Yeah. Well, I mean...
and that will bring back insurance, by the way. If the Senate does not flip red, and I'm not making a political statement, but if the Senate does not flip red, I think it's time to short every bond.
There's a lot there. I mean, there's this guy Vivek coming in, with a legit role. So what can he cut? What will he cut? What will he do? What will he do to healthcare? What will he do to the Fed? I don't know if you've seen, I had him sitting in that chair, Vivek.
Well, he interviewed me about the Fed.
He's so negative, more negative than I could ever be about the Fed.
Well, he shouldn't have spoken to me.
But it's not like, his basic premise is we don't need 20,000 people on the taxpayer dollars to come up with what these two in blue could come up with like tomorrow. Yep. And with more accuracy, because what they're coming up with is not accurate. Yep. So, there are a lot of, to me, that's a really compelling, I'm not Trump or whatever, I'm not making that statement. I'm saying that if Trump wins, you get Vivek. And that's a thing.
Look, why is corporate America capitalizing on AI and other technologies and coming into this century, and the federal government of the United States cannot? These are our taxpayer dollars.
This is an election year. I mean, you know.
Screw the election year part. I mean, they'll be battling about the midterms in about 2 months.
But if a third of fake job gains or whatever they were last year were government deficits, you borrow to hire somebody to overpay him to do nothing. And it's the.
I mean, they're literally the sole remaining enclave of I want to work from home. I mean, recently people are like,
Are
I'm
they?
gonna keep working from home, and Amazon said, go for it, 7 days a week. You want it 3 days a week working from home? I'll give you 7. Just not on the payroll, but I'll give you 7. And yet federal employees don't have to come into the office at all, and they're still paying rent on all that property in DC. I mean, some things are just low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
That is so easily addressed. And, you know, 2 of them are get your ass back into the office and deploy technology to make any organization more efficient.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that the Federal Reserve, I mean, how many people do you think you work there? I mean, how many people do you think you would need? I don't want to get you in trouble here.
Well, I mean, you know, somebody's got to, you know, my mother still writes physical checks. So,
yeah, you have those jobs. I get that, but like, really, how many?
and actually,
how many PhDs do you need?
About 10% of what they have, maybe.
Yeah,
Maybe.
Like, we're talking largesse.
I mean, the whole. Look, Vivek read Fed Up.
Yeah.
Before I ever went to Columbus, Ohio, and
Fed
met
Up
with
is Danielle's book. If you haven't read it.
I mean, we need pragmatists.
Mm-hmm.
We need people on the receiving end of monetary policy to make monetary policy. I know that sounds radical, but pie in the sky, ivory tower, I mean, life cannot be modeled. It just can't. And to suggest that people who have never held a payroll, have never run a business, should be making monetary policy is completely asinine. Now, you may or may not have noticed that things blow up in the 12th district. Little Orange Man, Countrywide, Silicon Valley Bank. Do you detect a pattern here?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so
fractal.
regulating the banking system might be important. Actually, regulating the banking system and the non-banking system might be important, since the non-banking system's larger than the conventional banking system. So there is a role to be played, but you know, I've always been of the mind that why is there an OCC, an FDIC, an SEC, a Fed, and then they have to get together and decide how they're going to regulate, how they're going to coordinate regulation. And I'm like, why don't we just have a regulator, like one?
Yeah.
And that way, you know, Yellen's not trying to extend a line of credit to a bank on the day that the OCC is closing it, happened during the financial crisis. Why do you have to have all of these regulators? Mm-hmm. Why can't you just have one?
Yeah, why can't you just have one process to count the beans? I mean, like, I count the beans in the economy, you count the beans in the economy every day. Why do we have to have 30 different forecasts that don't work, you know, to count the beans? I mean, I don't...
So that they can they can get together at a conference
right.
of multiple regulatory institutions somewhere sunny and compare bean counting.
Yeah. So bad. I
mean, it is bad.
So if they took, you know, I actually, having sat across from the guy, and I'm not politically oriented, I don't really know that many politicians because I don't want to.
Mm-hmm. You're a Canadian, you don't really have to either.
Yeah, but I could tell, but just like he's very similar to you in the sense that he's a street smart person. Like when it comes to some of these topics, and this is it on Vivek, but I'm just saying, like, what if he came to you and said, hey, you know, now I'm in the seat over here, and because the next guy I'm talking to, by the way, I think he called him on the same topic with the same point, but on healthcare, what he would do, who he would hire,
yeah.
and he said, okay, look, Danielle, like, how would we start to talk about the labor data? Because the way you write about the labor data, I said it on our morning meeting this morning. I'm like, I have probably the world's best analyst when it comes to front running, like what the Fed's actually going to do. Yep. But also disaggregating the data. Like you've been very good at saying, okay, look, I think Powell's, you know, you've nailed basically Powell's behavior.
Well, yeah.
But he
actually mentions non-Fed sanctioned data sources out loud in public.
Because he reads your stuff.
Well, that's true.
Right? So, okay, instead of just reading your stuff secretly and creating this kind of passive-aggressive story, like you could look at, like just go through it. The labor data that you depict is not the labor data. Well, now it's the labor data that he's leaning on, which is negative, but it's been rate of change negative for a long time.
Look, it does not take a genius to say Uber came into existence in 2009. So why are we comparing the world pre-2009 to today's world and saying jobless claims are so low? Well, let's take the great state of Tennessee, where you can get up to 12 weeks of unemployment insurance. Now that's at the extreme. There's only 3 states that you can only get 12. Most states are 26 weeks. But if you do that math, and
Canada,
you're like,
I think you can go for a couple years on Pogie.
okay, well, you know, but there's not that many Canadians, you know. I mean, it's
But jobless claims,
spread it out.
Jobless claims. The conventional wisdom is that the claims are low. Like
of course
Austin
they're low.
Rules today.
Why would you take 12 weeks of like $300 a week, when if you're in Nashville, Tennessee, when you could go drive for Uber and make 3 times that?
Yeah.
You do the math. The problem is that pool of gig workers is already filling up pretty fast. We have more part-time workers than we did at the peak of the aftermath of the Great Recession today.
Yep.
And that's where your initial jobless claimants are. And on top of that, you've had a doubling in the number of Americans collecting food stamps. Just flat out, Americans on welfare has gone through the roof. Why is that? Keith, we've had 17 straight months of what we call the exhaustion rate for continuing jobless claimants rising. 17 straight months where you blast right through all 26 weeks of your unemployment benefits in XYZ state, and you roll off. You run out of benefits. And we wonder why the number of food stamp recipients has doubled in a K-shaped economy.
Yeah, K-shaped. There's another, there's a trigger. Like, why doesn't the Fed, as a matter of practice, talk about the K-shaped economy? Like, name it. It's not K for Keith, it's K-shaped economy.
Yep.
And your policies perpetuate those of us on the right side of the K getting paid, and the people have to eat it. So
I mean, look, when gross domestic income for 2023 was revised up, all these people on Twitter are like, nanny, boo-boos, and I'm like, hey, genius. Pay somebody 5.5% on their cash, whip out $20 billion a month in employee retention credit, and you're gonna blow prior income models out of the water.
Yeah.
And of course the wealthy sitting on cash. And what happened when the Fed lowered rates by 50 basis points? Money market fund assets went up. I'm like, people are doing the cash on the sidelines, Danielle, and I'm like, or money market fund assets went up when the Fed lowered interest rates. You tell me.
you're getting good at just like the counterpunch. You've always been good at it, but now, because
I spend a lot less time on Twitter than I used to, because I really do need to spend a little bit more time being introspective and not calling out brainiacs.
leading the discussion instead of reacting to dumb shit. I mean, there's that.
Technical
right?
term. Thank you.
Now, okay, we have to agree because it's an empirical fact. You borrow, you build the deficit, you hire people, government jobs. That was a huge component of the labor force in terms of incremental adds last year. But if you look at what you've written extensively about the private sector, if I separate those two things, guys, show slide 78. We're showing.
You want to talk about private sector?
Core private sector employment growth.
Oh.
Okay.
That's not pretty.
So this is what I mean. It's like this chart. You'd have to slide 72. Sorry. You'd have to be, which I am blind apparently if I don't put my glasses on. I think it's 72. So that chart on the left. That's the rate of change of employment growth. I mean, it's been collapsing since it peaked when this cycle peaked in 2021.
Yep.
So this is like just in one picture. Like, I know you got respect for Powell. Not that doesn't mean you agree with everything he says, but you have respect for him, right? As a human being.
I have more respect for him than I have for his 3 predecessors.
Yeah, that's a low bar. It's the soft bigotry of low expectations.
One of them has a Nobel Prize, Keith.
But I think Vivek would say, or I would say, or anybody who looks at rate of change, and you would say, look, this is not a new story. Like, why haven't you guys been talking about deteriorating private sector employment growth?
He did, though, finally.
But he did finally. That's what I mean. After the thing collapsed.
Well, the QCEW for 818,000 was a little difficult to ignore.
Right. So how do you circle the square? Like, you can't, right? I mean, so you can't.
Look, we did this last payroll report. We wanted to do. We wanted to go beyond the zero hedges of the world. We wanted to go beyond it's all government jobs. So we focused in just on the private sector and found that well more than 50% of the jobs created in the private sector were in education and healthcare. Look, if your kid's sick, are you going to be like, well, the cycle's dictating that we really shouldn't be spending money at the doctor, so let's just see how this strep throat, let's just watch. Or your ankle's broken and maybe it'll heal itself. I mean, no, you're going to go to the doctor. And I've got 4 kids. They're going to go to school. So these are recession-proof industries. But for the month of September and August and July and June and May and April and March and February and January, these 2 recession-proof sectors have accounted for more than 50% of private market job creation. That means that the private sector outside of recession-proof industries is atrophying.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can see that in the NFIB data, which is depressionary, never mind recessionary.
The NFIB data, you want to know what was scary about the NFIB data? Inventories.
You mean the number that just, NFIB is small business report, disaggregates a whole bunch of stuff, but the September numbers that just came out, you're talking about
I mean,
the inventory
uncertainty
number?
went through the roof, CapEx fell, but the inventory crashed.
Okay.
Now, if you're Joe Q, I have a gift shop, I don't know, a few months before the holidays, and you're planning to drastically reduce your inventory, what does that say about your own personal prospects for your own business?
Yeah.
And I mean, that's why we study things like backlogs, and because backlogs dictate pent-up demand, which dictates labor demand. I mean, you got to back it up. So we follow backlogs, we follow inventories, and it was inventories in NFIB that moved the most dramatically.
So you have a bull market in government spending, and you have a bear market in small business. It's all on, again, it's...
You do have a bull market in government spending, but it's not very efficient. I
No,
mean,
it's terrible.
It's like they gave Intel a ratio. For every $1 billion we give you, you've got to fire 1,000 people. $20 billion, 20,000 layoffs. I mean, this is crazy government spending. And it's attached to ESG and DEI, and you have to hire unionized. And it's old-fashioned pork barrel spending. Michael Harton at Bank of America has done really good work that shows that after interest payments are netted out, the federal government's a net drag on spending because they spend so inefficiently. If they're not handing out money directly deposited in U.S. household checking accounts, which they haven't done for a while.
Now, some people, like everyone who doesn't do the job the right way, which looks at everything. You can't just look at one thing and come up with a narrative. I guess you can. You can do whatever you want.
Of course you can.
But they will say, oh, that inventory is because people are nervous about the election. I have a chart that shows some version of that. But
so you can count them right now. Every single earnings release where they're missing on their top line, they're mentioned, once we get past the election, demand's going to come roaring back. And I'm like,
what?
Is that because part-time jobs are at a record high and that's been additive to aggregate income? Oh, sorry, math. Well,
I mean, the economic cycle, even on a reported basis, peaked in the second quarter at 3%. So now you're seeing all the rate of change data decelerate, including the labor data, which had already been decelerating.
It's being flattered by imports because China's dumping everything that they possibly can in our ports. So imports flatter GDP math. On top of that, it's totally ass-backwards math, but GDP math is also being flattered.
So what happens, how do you project Powell's behavior if we get the rate of change of growth, real growth this way, and we get inflation start to hook up? Doesn't have to go up a lot. Like we have it going, actually we just updated our inflation nowcast, post this number, so now we're going back to 2.62 I think next month, which would be up 18 beeps, but not down anymore. Inflation's gone down on a trending basis for 28 months. That's an amazing period of time.
It's going to resume the decline after we get past a few months. Well, the port strike was, 3 days? So there's reasons, and shelter is hosed. I mean, you have entire communities in North Carolina and in Tennessee that will never rebuild, ever.
You're talking post-Helene?
And people ignore that, and my gosh, I spoke to a friend of mine in one county where 170 kids are missing still.
What?
The media is not covering it. Milton was like a good little distraction for the media to quit covering that area of the country.
170 missing kids?
In a county.
This
I mean,
isn't like the eating the
landslides.
dogs thing. This is
No, but landslides took off the sides of entire mountains where communities were.
Right.
But these houses are never going to be rebuilt.
That's awful.
They're never going to be rebuilt, and the media is never going to report on this, by the way. Not any side of the media.
Where was it reported? How do you know that?
Because she's there on the ground with
Oh.
the parents.
Holy shit. It's just like the immigration story. Like they finally sent people down to the border to count. You know, it's like, oh, the number's like 6 million.
Yeah. And by the way, they're making the most treacherous. I lived in Venezuela. It ain't easy to get from Venezuela all the way up in the United States.
When
That
did
is
you
the
live in Venezuela?
The summer of '95, after the soft landing summer, but it wasn't a soft landing on Wall Street. So in between the first and second years of business school, Goldman Sachs was like, go perfect your Spanish. Go work someplace where they don't speak English. I got there the first day of work and I'm like, excusez-moi? And I'm like, oh shit, Spanish. Perdón? Microsoft Word and Inglés. And they're like, ¿cómo? And I'm like, oh shit.
We've had so many conversations. I mean, it's
So I
rare
came
that
home,
learned something like-
like dreaming in Spanish. Ahora ya hablo español. But what I'm saying is the journey is so treacherous. I mean, we don't appreciate how much damage communism does to countries, that people would take these hugely treacherous journeys. We're not just talking about people coming in from Mexico. They're coming all the way from South America. But anyways, yes, I live in Texas. Yes, they have a miscounting problem.
So
But by the way, they don't have work. You know what? The construction workers right now are out of work because the permitting for single family homes has gone to hell in a handbasket. They're all waiting to convoy to Florida. Problem is, go to Fort Myers today, you still see places that are empty lots after Ian. I mean, homeowners insurance in Florida it's a thing. This is not like June of 2020 when the whole world is flocking there. It's a different place. So I double dog. People are like, what do you think the Fed policy is going to be in a year? And I'm like,
in a year?
What do you think Florida is going to be like in 2 months? I mean, can we just stop and have a shorter term conversation here?
No, it's just because people want an answer that they need. That's what.
Oh yeah.
And
I mean, the market. I was like, well, the market was pricing in 7 rate cuts at the beginning of the year. And that was you when you had your aggressive hat on, and now you have the Fed's never going to have to lower interest rates as long as we live. I'm like, make up your mind.
I mean, guys, can you show that chart we showed this morning on the macro show on that front, where we're showing the pendulum? You know where it is. So this is just to Danielle's point. I like it when somebody speaks and what they're saying is empirically true. Go to slide 46. So this is kind of for you and I. This is pretty exciting, right? Because you and I get paid on this to help people talk about this and risk manage it. But number of cuts priced for 2024. Yeah, there was like 8 to 10 of them priced in. Then they took them all out with inflation going from 3.1 to 3.48.
Yeah.
Yep. So like 40 basis points of inflation going up, which is basically what I'm looking for in the next couple months. So then they take them all out, and then they put them all back in. You know, so that's my question on Powell is like, if inflation's going up for the next 1, 2, and 3 months, does he go back? Like, I mean, does that reverse again? Because now we've gone from.
So, Keith, I think if there's one thing that I noticed today, it was the non-Hurricane Helene states that had material increases in their initial jobless claims.
Oh, in the claims report. Okay.
It was the jump in continuing jobless claims that are from the week prior that have nothing to do with Helene. We'll see continuing claims reflect Helene next week because it's initial and then continuing with a 1 week lag. Once you start to get to that 2 million number, and again, the exhaustion rate has been increasing for 17 months. We're not seeing continuing claims continue to rise because so many millions of Americans are exhausting their benefits. Just wait for this earnings season.
Well,
wait for how many people to include one more layoff announcement with this earnings season. And again, I mentioned that the pool of gig workers is pretty full. You only need so many DoorDash drivers.
Right.
You don't need as many as what we have. And so Powell's going to be, if inflation goes up a whole bunch, Powell's going to have stagflation on his hands.
Well, that's our call. Actually, we call it Quad 3. But it's interesting that you answered an inflation question with the jobs answer, right? Because that's
well, he's going to have no choice but to focus on the jobs.
Right, that's right. So that's where I wanted to get to.
It really doesn't matter who's in the White House.
Because I'm pretty sure, like, Liz Ann and I, who I know you have a lot of respect for, same birthday?
Same birthday.
Yeah, awesome. You two, you guys should do this instead of, but, I said to her, I said, Fed policy is employment, inflation, and where's the S&P 500? And she disagreed to some extent on the S&P 500. But I was just trying to use the three-legged stool. You can substitute S&P 500 with VIX hit 65 in August 5th, okay? Like, I think Powell saw that. One, do you agree with that? But two, are you saying that they'll just lean to the employment side of the stool because the inflation piece you can't lean on it anymore? Or at least...
They won't have a choice, and shelter inflation is going to turn down.
Yeah.
It's just happening with a really long lag, but it's happening, again, because liquidity is drying up for the marginal buyer. Mm-hmm. Second home sales have absolutely collapsed. That's bad. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about investors. And we're seeing, especially, I'm in the other ground zero. It's not as bad in Texas as it is in Florida, but it's pretty, you cannot pull up a Zillow map of the city of Dallas and see any land. It's all dots of homes for sale. And they're not even pretending anymore. They're not staging them. They're just empty houses that were bought to rent that are on the market. So the liquidity situation, Ally Financial told us, charge-offs are going way up. We're going to hear from the biggest banks here in the next few days. They're going to tell us charge-offs are going up. They didn't pull back on growing their credit card books, the biggest banks, because they weren't accounting for buy now, pay later. Hello, compliance, get me compliance. So they weren't accounting for buy now, pay later. So even after they finished growing their auto loan book, they kept growing their credit card loan book. Now they've got a provision for that. So you can't tell me that they're going to have looser lending standards for mortgages. It ain't going to happen. A loan book's a loan book, and you have to look at it holistically, especially when you're sitting on a bunch of unrealized losses in commercial real estate, and somebody's just whispered in your ear, oh, by the way, the narrative on Wall Street is now that the Fed should slow the pace at which it lowers rates. So all those security losses we're sitting on, they're going to fester for a little bit longer. Merry Christmas.
It's not funny. It's actually that's why you see so many small businesses are just like apoplectic about what's going on.
Well, look, there was a 20 basis point differential between the prime rate and where small businesses were borrowing, according to the NFIB, in February, a 20 basis point differential. By the time we get to September, it's a 210 basis point differential. You are being bent over as a small company in terms of what you have to pay to borrow. Yep. You don't have access to the junk bond market. They're like, oh, CLO sales are taking off again. And I'm like, and what's that going to do for Main Street? Help me out here. Nada.
Yeah, that's a K-shaped relationship as well. We show this plenty of times, which is people like me and companies like mine get paid. And if you're the small business who has to operate on any leverage with little cash flow and your employee costs keep going up, you're fucked, and that's the difference.
And and think about it. This is like the fourth or fifth battle that, first it was like, okay, Home Depot can stay open, but as long as you mask up, but even if you mask up, all the small businesses have to close. They're not essential. And then Chipotle is paying like $20 an hour with benefits, so you can't compete with that as a small business owner to bring the employees on that you need to bring on after the economy reopens. They have been kicked while they're down time and again and again and again. And I just have to wonder, who the hell is going to advocate for small businesses?
Taking their tax rate to 15% would help.
Yeah,
that would be a big one. But on the way there,
flat tax.
Just kind of going back to like where I'm trying to get to. So you're saying that even if the inflation data lifts, you're about to hit a shitstorm of earnings season, labor data, and if you think
insiders have been selling their stock.
Right.
They're telling you that their profit margins aren't where they need to be to stop selling their stock because they get paid based on earnings per share. And until their earnings per share are high enough, they're not going to stop firing people.
Right.
Simple as that, because all they give a shit about is their paycheck.
Agreed. Jensen pulled forward all of his stock sales too. People are like, oh, that's bullish for the stock because he's done selling. I'm like, what world do these people on Reddit live in? The dude pulled forward selling his stock in your yap. What do you think that means about and it was at the all-time high. before it went down 27%.
Yep.
So it's a crazy thing.
Airbnb's had a tad bit of, anyways.
So it depends on where I do the meetings. Like when I was doing the meetings in Chicago, please, if you're in Chicago and you're a client, don't get upset about it. But I mean, they won't push back on it as much as if I'm doing meetings in Texas or meetings certainly in Miami.
Yep.
You know, where they'll say, well, what do you think the labor data, these jobs reports are going to look like after the election if Trump wins? Like immediately after. And they're like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, every one of these basically has been made up, like, you know, like revised down. Now you can say on the order of, I know that this is your
what
like
was originally reported,
coiled spring on this topic.
What was originally reported on the White House lawn as being 2.4 million private sector jobs in the year ended March 31, 2024, just so now happens to be 1.4 million. So just a little rounding error. T9C.
But from the most recent, from that September number was like, you know, you'd think that you're going back to 5% GDP growth.
Yep.
So that number versus the first number, the November number.
And there was no coincidence that we had record seasonality for a September in ADP and
both BLS. Yeah. And claims were lower that week too. But so this isn't a conspiracy theory.
America.
What like how do you explain it? Like
I think look, this is not political. I think that the NBER, who happens to consist solely of Obama appointees, will give it 2 months if Trump wins and say, you know, time is of the essence. We've waited a wee bit too long here. So we're just going to replace the R with a D. And we're not going to call it a recession. We're just going to go right up. Who's in the White House again? Oh, that's right. We'll just call it a depression. And by the way, and it's his fault. He made it happen in 60 days.
That's like, you know.
That's cynical, isn't it? That wasn't nice.
Well, I mean, okay, that's fine. What do you think? I mean, do you want to go there? Do you have an opinion on the election and how?
I don't.
Or scenario analysis on what would happen if?
I don't have an opinion on the election because I genuinely think that there are two cohorts that don't want to be polled. 110% of Trumpians and anybody young. And prior to Harris being in the race, I think your average 24 to 35-year-old on election day would have been like, insane geriatric, dead geriatric. I'm going to go to Starbucks instead, and not voted. But after Harris got in the campaign, you kind of invigorated this younger set of people, and they're like, man, she'll give us everything. Okay, I'll meet you at Starbucks after you vote. Got it? Good. So, but they're not polling either. They don't want to be polled.
No.
And no Trumpian wants to be polled.
Well, I mean,
at all. So we don't know what the polls reveal. What I can tell you is what I'm hearing from people in the great state of North Carolina. And if anything throws this election, it's those 16 electoral votes. They're pissed off. They are pissed off. And it is a blue state. And it is 16 electoral votes can move the needle. And the people of North Carolina give a shit that the helicopters were sitting on the ground. They care.
So if you have, and it's a different.
That's why they call them. It's not even a swing state. It wasn't in the calculus prior to Helene. It's up for grabs now. It is a jump ball.
There's a big difference between having.
And by the way, that was a humanitarian statement, not a political one.
No, I don't think so. I mean, that didn't sound. Since I'm not really political, I don't really hear these things. I was just told by. We're talking about physical gold buying, and he said, you can't say that. The physical gold bugs are going to like lose it on you, Keith. I'm like, I'm telling them to buy gold, and he's like, you're not saying it the way they like it. You know, it's like enough. It's like, let's try to have some common sense here. But when it's a different question to ask somebody, what do you think is going to happen in the election, versus if I give you Trump a win, what would change in terms of your model? Like, how would you think that through?
Nothing. I mean, we forget that Obama was 5.4% negative deficit spending, and then like Trump was like 6.6, and Biden's been like 7.2, all negatives in front of him.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're asking me to split a hair between 7% and 7%,
yeah, it's kind of what I say.
I think the outcome of the Senate is all that really matters, because I don't. Again, I agree with you. All politicians are drunken sailors. as long as you're spending on what they want to spend on. So I think that it really makes a difference. And right now, Vegas, Predict It, whatever, is saying that the Senate is north of 70% chance of flipping red. And so, and you've got this little thing called the Supreme Court that happens to have a little calculator going right now, and they're like, okay, wait a minute, all this student loan forgiveness, it now adds up to more than what we said was unconstitutional. So I think that we can't completely give up on the democracy, because I do think that even though the Senate will spend on whatever it wants to spend on, I think that a red Senate will stop universal basic income from coming back in its true form. Let's pay people to not work and call it that.
Yep.
And I think that the Supreme Court will make sure that it is Congress, to the extent that the Supreme Court can, that it's Congress that's got the powers of the purse. So I think that there's some semblance of democracy still intact after the election, regardless of who's occupying the White House.
If it's Trump, if it's
Neither can fire Powell.
This is what I was just
And
gonna
Harris
say.
would be more inclined.
That's what I mean. So if Harris
She was one
were
of 12 who joined Lizzie and voted against him in 2018. Harris.
And you would get Lyle Brainerd. She'd be top 3 candidate. No.
Anything stronger than?
But there's a big difference there.
Oh my gosh. Look, what people don't realize is that May 2026 is like spitting distance away. It's quick.
Yep.
And you've got a Federal Reserve Board that, aside from Waller, is pretty stacked with progressives. So if you put somebody like a Lyle Brainerd, you're gonna be immediately addressing climate change. And you're gonna have a central bank digital currency yesterday, which is Big Brother watching what you spend, which is quite communist. I mean, the Federal Reserve would completely change in its complexity. The only thing it wouldn't do after such a regime shift would be make monetary policy and regulate banks. But it would do everything else that is not the purview of a central bank. It's scary as all get out.
So in that regard, the outcome really does matter. Because you could have, if it's Trump, you get Vivek neutering the Fed, and if you get the alternative, you get MMT on steroids.
And everything else. And CBDC, which I think is a big deal.
Yeah.
CBDC is a big deal.
That's-
Maybe not in Xi Jinping's world, but in this world, it should be a big deal for somebody to monitor your spending and penalize you if you save.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're going to deposit $1 in the bank, you're only going to get 97 cents.
Jeez.
Back in the USSR.
I just don't want to live in Moscow. No. I said that the other day to somebody and they laughed. I'm like, what are you laughing at? You want to go live there? I mean, so maybe one of the last questions on this. I mean, I think, so if you took, again, scenario Trump, Vivek, maybe Judy Shelton gets appointed as well. Her book just came out. I just had a conversation like this with her. It was very popular. And it was like, because she...
You mean sound money put together is a something?
Yeah. I thought, like what's interesting when you don't know somebody, I mean, but who has a reputation, in particular in this day and age, when one side paints, like I thought she was going to be some kind of a crazy hardliner. She is.
She's just a soft-spoken sound money advocate.
Yeah, it was
It's pretty simple.
It was the opposite of what I was.
Yeah, I've known Judy for years.
Yeah, so she would be interested in that, right? She just came out with her new book, Good as Gold, I think it's called.
She would be interested in sound money, yes she would.
Yeah, but that would be a very different Federal
And
Reserve.
making policy. And that's, I haven't given up on my country. I haven't. Because I don't think that all roads lead to socialism in America. I can't believe that. I mean, I have children, so I can't believe that that's their future. And by the way, big old shout out to our kids' generation. Their work ethic is off the charts.
Yep.
So you can't tell me that America's gone.
You mean our kids? Like
Yes.
define the age, obviously, so people
So,
know.
okay, my oldest is, maybe not my, I mean, love him. He makes a very good fraternity boy. But I mean, no, there's a generation behind the Z's that wants to work.
Yep.
And there are people who love the United States and want sound money and don't want to give up the reserve currency status at gunpoint. And with good reason.
Yeah, and they're asking the right questions.
Sure.
Like I have a 14-year-old daughter, 16-year-old son. Their work ethic is incredible, and so is that of all their friends.
Right.
They want to achieve something.
Yeah.
And they're like very it's a bit of a echo chamber, right? Your kids, Culver kids, that's a very disciplined, hardworking culture.
Right.
So I want.
Look, if one of them, spends everything, every dime he gets. But the stated policy is, if you get a certain amount of money to not eat in the mess hall and eat at the shack instead, and you have anything left over at the end of the month from what the monthly stipend is, we double it and throw it in savings. Mm-hmm. You can teach your kids sound money policies at home, and that's where it starts.
Yeah, and I think, someone like that, all you'd have to do is continue to listen to it.
Yeah.
There's a reason why it's the most viewed video that we have. Ironically, that and the Vivek one, right? And they kind of go together in this scenario if that was the Fed. And neither of us is saying that has to be that way, but it could.
Yes.
Yeah,
there is a pathway to sanity.
Yeah. Well, I think, just to end on this, because we got to wrap up, but I think a lot of people will try to define you in different ways, but I've always thought of you as like this American patriot, hard-ass chick that understands what's going on, and she really wants the best for the country. I've never really ever seen you be this doomer.
No. Look, if they said, look, you're limited to 2 words on your tombstone, I would say pragmatic patriot. That's it.
That's a good way to end it. I like that. That's really good. Thank you. Thank you for being
It's great to be here in Connecticut.
The
Love to
pragmatic patriot. And you know what? The best part of it, it's true. And there are a lot of you that are also like that. I'm a Canadian trying to be like an American patriot because we know that you guys are a little harder core on certain matters. So stay hard, as we like to say. And I'm going to have Mike Taylor talking about a lot of fun stuff next.